Now, greater size does equal greater dominance. But, as I said before, size is not the only way to create dominance. More contrast also equals more dominance. If the smaller shape has more contrast than a larger shape, guess what? The small guy wins. Right? So contrast trumps size every single time. It's also true that more negative space equals more dominance, even though that big border contains, more stuff. It's bigger, there's more of it. That trapped negative space in the middle focuses your eye on that center square. So let's look at a couple more examples. Which element is most dominant here? Pretty obvious, right? This gigantic red image in the center is totally dominant because it's got the most contrast. It also has the most color saturation. And in addition to the contrast between the picture and its background, there's also a high degree of contrast between the text on the left, Air Jordan flight suit, and the red background that it sits on. Okay, so this wins automatically. What element's most dominant here? Pretty obvious as well. This image has the most contrast. It's the area of the most color, and it absolutely separates itself from the stark white behind it. All right. Google did this from day one on purpose, and it's why the perception is that this is so easy to use. Also because there's only one thing on the screen, essentially, of primary importance, and that's search. Everything else is set very far apart in proximity from the search action. But this single image approach creates instant dominance. There's no question where you're supposed to start on the page because the search is always right below it. Which element is dominant here? A little tougher, right? This continue button is most dominant. And the reason for that is because it's a visual anomaly from everything else. Okay, take a look at all that's going on here. Even though there's a lot of contrast in those images down below, they're not big areas of flat color. There's still a lot of activity inside each one of those images. This button stands by itself because it's the only one of its kind on this page. And it's surrounded, again, by a very dark color. The contrast between those two things goes a long way in saying, hey, do this. How about here? Answer is none of them. Okay, nothing here is dominant. It is all of equal visual importance. From size to negative space to how balance and rhythm and harmony is applied to how color is used, they all just sort of work against each other. They're all screaming for attention. All right, if we look at this stuff, all these things are pretty much the same. All right, the user testing, sign up, get paid to test, pricing and sign up, watch a demo. They're all essentially the same size. Same color use, same amount almost of each color in each instance. All right, nothing really stands out because they're all sort of the same. These three things, there's a constant ping back. Okay, I'm going from logo to buttons to buttons to logo to buttons. You're going in a loop, and your eye can't settle on any one thing. All right, this big area, this huge photograph is calling a tremendous amount of attention to itself, and it's absolutely fighting with those buttons that are on top of it because there isn't enough contrast. And there's way too much detail in these photographs. There's a million little areas of positive and negative space from the folds of that person's shirt to the lace detail on the other woman's red shirt to all the shelves behind it, all those block areas that get created. There's shapes all over the place. Then you're putting text on top of it and you're creating even more interaction between positive and negative space. There's a million trapped spaces in that text and detail of the photos running behind it, right? The edges of her shirt or her hair or the M that runs across the woman's mouth or insights and that run across the other woman's mouth. These are all very bad decisions. Nothing stands out. Nothing is purely dominant because there is just too much activity everywhere. Too much interplay between positive and negative. Too much interplay between shapes and color. How about this? Which element is dominant here? Same answer. None of them. All these things, every element on this screen, they're all of equal size, pretty much equal contrast. The variance is pretty much consistent in that nothing really stands out as heavier or bigger or darker or having more negative space around it than the other elements. There isn't enough of a difference between all of them to separate them, to create that dominance that we keep talking about. Okay, these are just a bunch of seemingly unrelated elements. There is no balance here. There is no rhythm here. There is no harmony here. There's no consistency. There's no repetition. There are no visual echoes. Everything is different. Everything is separate. Everything stands on its own, and everything is calling for our attention. Poor design, poor user experience. So UI design mantra 9 is that dominance is what directs user focus. You must lead people through the layouts that you create. You must provide a starting point, an entry point, a clear signal that says you start here and then you move this way. From individual elements like forms to entire layouts, you have got to create visual hierarchy. And you do that by starting with dominance.